The initial tranquilizer dart found its target cleanly in the walrus's massive shoulder. We considered ourselves lucky. The wind had died down, the sea ice was stable, and the animal had approached the edge of the floe, allowing us to get close without risking an unexpected breakup. 5 months into the research season, my team and I had settled into the quiet, professional rhythm of experts who performed this procedure countless times. Dart, dose, weigh, move in, measure, tag, release. Routine. But this encounter wasn't routine. The walrus swayed, let out a deep, shuddering bellow, then settled onto the ice without a struggle. Its immense weight flattened the snow, and steam faintly rose from its thick hide. I gave the signal, and we advanced in our heavy gear, our footsteps and breathing loud in the absolute stillness. Up close, it was a healthy male, prime condition, with magnificent tusks and a coat of thick blubber for the winter, a textbook specimen. I had already opened the instrument case when Dr. Chen crouched by its neck and frowned. Team. At first I thought she was indicating scar tissue or an old, healed injury. Then I noticed the band of metal half buried in the folds of its neck fat. The walrus already had a tag, and it wasn't one of our standard GPS units. This was ancient, the bronze gone green with deep corrosion, pitted and heavily scarred, as if it had been in place for decades. The edges weren't smooth. They looked like they had been hammered into shape by hand, uneven but incredibly strong, riveted shut in a way that looked impossible to remove without injuring the animal. And there, etched into the metal, was a date, 1847. Beneath it, scratched deep enough to cut through the tarnish, was a spiral, not the simple design one doodles absent-mindedly, but a pattern that immediately caused visual discomfort. The lines intersected and looped back into themselves in a geometry that felt fundamentally wrong. A circuit that wasn't closed yet had no visible starting point. I stared too long and felt a wave of nausea. Good Lord, one of the junior researchers, Ben, whispered. This has to be a joke, right? Some old whaler's prank. Yeah, Dr. Chen said, forcing a weak laugh, because Inupiaq subsistence hunters in the 1800s were forging complex bronze collars for walruses in their spare time. No one laughed. We completed the standard biological examination in silence. We took tusk measurements, drew blood, and noted its vitals. Everything was perfectly normal except for the sedative. The dose should have rendered it unconscious for at least an hour. After only 15 minutes, the walrus's eyes slowly, deliberately, flickered open. I froze, the dart gun still dangling uselessly in my hand, needing a fresh cartridge. A process that would take too long if the walrus simply rose. The animal should have struggled, fought the effects of the drugs, and staggered. Instead, defying all reason, it merely stood, not a single stumble, just up on its feet, watching us with that deep, unblinking black gaze. We backed away, slowly raising our hands. No sudden movements. The walrus didn't follow us, but it didn't move away either. It simply stood there, colossal and silent, as we retreated to the snowmobiles and sped away. Dr. Chen broke the silence on the ride back to the research station. Maybe it led us to it, she said. The idea sounded ridiculous, but none of us could rationally refute it. That evening, after all the field gear was stowed and the biological data uploaded, I began sifting through the digital archives of expeditions north of Svalbard. I scrolled past whalers' logs, Royal Naval records, early Soviet mapping surveys. Every relevant scrap I could find. The specific coastline where we found the walrus was charted in 1818, but it wasn't extensively explored until 1862. Not a single recorded expedition had ever reached this far in 1847. The reality of an Arctic field station is that you accumulate significant downtime once the day's data is logged. Most people stream whatever the satellite internet can handle. Dr. Chen, however, is a digger. She has a relentless fascination with historical records, turning footnotes into endless research rabbit holes. That night, while the rest of us were playing cards in the common mess, she was still hunched over her laptop, scrolling through grainy PDFs of scanned expedition documents. "If no one was here in 1847, she muttered, "then why the hell does that collar say otherwise?" At first, she came up empty. I was half convinced the whole thing was a fluke. Maybe some eccentric seal hunter had engraved the date for a bizarre laugh. But then she found something truly strange. Not a published survey, nothing official. A letter archived deep in the basement of some forgotten Royal Society library. Digitized only because an overzealous intern scanned the wrong folder. It was barely legible. The ink smudged, the script wavering between elegant copperplate and sheer panic. Attached was a folded, hand-sketched map. The paper was crumpled and stained with what looked like grease or oil. The author identified himself as Dr. Alistair Rook, Royal Arctic Surveyor, 1847, except there was no Rook in any official expedition roster. No mention in whaling logs or naval commissions. The man simply did not exist in any official records. Yet, here he was, sketching out coastlines that shouldn't have been charted until decades later. And right in the center of the map, amid coded symbols inked in careful spirals and cross-hatched patterns, was a mark, Umbri Transitus, shadow crossing. Beneath it, Rook had frantically scribbled a note. "The gradient holds. The White King endures." None of us had any idea what that meant, nor if we even wanted to know. But when Dr. Chen overlaid the coordinates onto our modern survey charts, the result was chillingly precise. It matched a specific stretch of flat sea ice we had flown over dozens of times. Featureless, empty, nothing but wind-scoured snow and pressure ridges. I asked the obvious question. If this place is just flat ice, why mark it at all? Dr. Chen didn't look up from her laptop. Maybe he wanted someone to come back. The next morning, we packed light, just emergency survival gear, food rations, and a couple of sled-mounted survey drones. The plan was simple. A quick flight out, confirm the site, and if it was a bust, we'd have wasted nothing but aviation fuel. The mood, however, was sharper than usual. No one vocalized it, but we all felt the oppressive calm you get before a massive storm, when the air hangs heavy. Every time I glanced up from my pack, I caught Dr. Chen watching me, as if assessing whether I would back out. When I stepped outside to secure the equipment cases, I froze. On the horizon, perhaps half a mile out, a dark shape sat on the snow, massive, motionless, the same walrus. The bronze collar gleamed faintly in the dawn light. It didn't move as we loaded gear, nor when we hauled the sleds to the strip, but as the propellers roared to life and the aircraft nosed upward, I looked down one last time. The walrus was still there, utterly unmoving. Its head tilted back, its eyes fixed on the sky. The coordinates from Rook's map dropped us into what should have been an optical illusion. Just flat sea ice stretching to the horizon, white on white until the sky and ground blurred into one. From the air it looked like we were chasing a phantom, but as the plane dipped lower, Dr. Chen pressed against the window and swore. "There, look at the shadows." I didn't see it immediately. Then the weak morning sun hit the ice at just the right oblique angle, and the surface betrayed itself. The ice folded inward in long, concentric ridges, each step curling in on itself like the grooves of a shell. From directly above, the pattern was completely invisible. A trick of geometry, smooth as a billiard table. But if you looked hard enough, the spiral was undeniable. We circled twice for confirmation, then found a stretch of flat ice a half-kilometer away and brought the plane down on its skis. The engine's roar faded into silence, leaving only the sound of the wind groaning across the fuselage. We unloaded the sleds and gear, then set out on foot across the snow, the strange spiral drawing us in step by deliberate step. The spiral was clearly not a natural formation. The depression sloped gently downward, circling around a central point, perhaps 50 meters across, and at that heart, reaching through the ice as though the earth itself had grown tired of hiding it, lay a block of stone, nothing indigenous to the area, something profoundly alien. It was black-green, like oxidized copper but polished smooth, almost oily. Its surface actively shed the snow as if rejecting it. Every patch of ice within sight was heavily frosted, yet this platform remained bare, a seamless, perfect plug, set precisely in the spiral's center. We approached cautiously, dragging the sleds behind us. The closer we got, the more wrong the air felt. The ice didn't crunch underfoot, it whispered, thin layers shifting, reluctant to bear our weight. The atmosphere itself felt heavy, though our instruments showed nothing unusual. "Stone like this doesn't form up here," muttered Dr. Lars, our geologist. He knelt, his gloved hand brushing the edge where the ice met the block. "This isn't glacial drift. This was brought here." None of us responded. The idea of placing this immense slab here so long ago was too profound to articulate. We made camp at the edge of the depression, setting the tent against the constant wind. I tried to write notes that night, but found myself constantly staring at the platform through the fabric of my tent. It looked insignificant by day. At night, beneath the shifting green wash of the aurora borealis, it seemed immense, as if the spiral wasn't carved around it, but rather radiated out from it. That was when Dr. Chen called softly from outside, "The Walrus is back." It stood on the far side of the depression, higher up on the spiral ridge, still as a statue, watching us. Its bronze collar caught the aurora's light, gleaming faintly green. My stomach lurched. We had flown nearly 40 miles from the tagging site. Walruses often travel the pack ice, hunting or resting, but for it to be here meant it had followed us directly, without stopping. This was far from the normal behavior of a solitary bull walrus. "It's the same one," Dr. Chen whispered, her breath frosting the air. "It didn't just find us. It came here on purpose." No one argued. We all felt it. The walrus didn't move or charge. It simply watched, patient as the ancient ice. Then a second shape joined it on the ridge. Another massive silhouette, broad-shouldered, its breath misting. Then a third, silent, watching. At camp, the first obvious problem arose. Our batteries drained far faster than they should have. The drone controller lost signal twice, even before we attempted a launch. Compass needles jittered wildly, spinning like they were set on a loose pivot. Dr. Lars cursed over the instruments, insisting the magnetic anomalies made no conventional sense. But none of that frightened me as much as what Dr. Chen spotted just before dusk. "Another one," she said, pointing at the ridge. A fourth walrus stood watching us, this one noticeably larger, its hide mottled with age, its tusks heavily scarred. It didn't even twitch a whisker. It just watched, and then, 20 minutes later, came a fifth. That was when unease turned into something sharper. Walruses, especially bulls, are generally solitary or congregate in herds. Two together is rare in winter. But this many sitting at a distance like sentinels, silent, patient, and completely surrounding us, felt profoundly wrong. It went against every collective piece of knowledge we possessed about a species we were experts on. "They're surrounding us," murmured Dr. Daniels, his voice low, as if afraid the animals might hear. "Good heavens, they're actually surrounding us." I found myself instinctively running calculations. Distance to the plane, distance to the rifles we'd laid by the sleds, the average charge speed of a walrus. Every calculation ended the same way, badly. If they intended to charge, we wouldn't stand a chance, but they didn't. They held their ground. Their presence weighed heavily on us. Every time one of us looked up from a task, there would be a colossal white shape at the edge of vision, unmoving, patient. It didn't feel like hunger. It felt like we were being herded. To distract ourselves, we pushed ahead with the drone, utilizing what little power it had left. We found a narrow, linear feature at the spiral's edge, a crack that led downward into absolute blackness. The machine dipped inside, its camera casting a cone of light. For a moment, we saw impossible things. Angles folding in on themselves, stone-shaped yet somehow melted. Structures that seemed to have been carved or grown. Layers of hexagons fused together in a lattice that looked disturbingly like bone. Then the feed stuttered. The last frame froze on something curved, ribbed, too organic for architecture, and the drone went instantly dead. Dr. Daniels snapped. He swore, grabbed the rifles, and declared that we needed to leave immediately. "This is insane. So many cursed walruses watching us like prison guards. Equipment dying, drones failing. I'm not dying out here for some ridiculous map." Dr. Chen didn't flinch. She just looked at him, her voice utterly calm. "They're not stopping us. If they wanted us gone, we'd be gone already. Don't you see? They're leading us somewhere." No one disagreed. We couldn't. However, their true intentions remained chillingly unclear. That night, none of the walruses approached, none charged. They stayed exactly where they were, each on their ridge outlined against the aurora. But in the morning, when we woke, the snow told a different story. Their tracks completely circled the camp. It happened fast. One moment, Dr. Lars was carefully edging along the spiral's rim to retrieve a core sample. The next, the ground gave way with a sound like the world tearing open. The snow sagged, then instantly dropped. Two figures vanished into the white spray, Dr. Lars and Dr. Daniels. The rest of us lunged for the edge, but the crack widened under our weight, forcing us back. "Rope! Get the ropes!" Dr. Chen shouted, already kneeling, knotting a line to the sled anchor. We peered into the split. It wasn't bottomless, just steep. A funnel sloping down maybe 20 meters. It was unnervingly smooth, like it had been carved by something other than water or weather, the kind of surface no crampon would ever bite into. Dr. Daniels was already scrambling to his feet, cursing, his parka torn at the shoulder. Dr. Lars lay half buried in the drift at the base, clutching his ankle. "Not broken," he gasped when we reached him. "But it's bad." His face was pale, his jaw tight. A severe sprain, perhaps worse. He could hobble, but if we needed to move quickly, he'd be left behind. The shaft walls reflected our headlamps strangely, the light bouncing too far, as if the ice was deeper, thicker than it had any right to be. We rigged a lifeline and descended one by one. The silence deepened as we went down. By the time my boots hit the floor beside Dr. Lars, I realized I could no longer hear the wind. No creak of ice, no groan of shifting snow. The world above us was gone, sealed by silence. It was like stepping into a vacuum. Dr. Chen glanced upward. Sound should carry down. "Why can't we hear anything from above?" No one answered. We dragged Dr. Lars to a hollow in the ice, a natural alcove just wide enough for 4 of us to huddle, a concave wall curving like the inside of a rib cage. The air was stale, colder than the shaft itself. It would serve as shelter, just enough time to rest. Then we'd haul Dr. Lars back up in the morning. Dr. Daniels sat apart from the rest, staring up at the shaft. Who was watching? He whispered. I turned. What? He looked at me as if he regretted speaking, but the words continued to spill out. When you guys descended before the snow closed, I looked up. One of them was at the rim, the collared one. It didn't move, just stood there, looking down. And then I asked. Dr. Daniels swallowed. Then it walked away. No one spoke after that. We lit the stove, made hot tea, and tried to ignore the way the alcove walls glittered with frost. The glow of the flame cast strange shadows, stretching them into angles that didn't belong. Dr. Lars groaned softly, his ankle packed in snow to keep the swelling down. Sleep came in thin, uneasy fragments. When I woke in the dim light of my headlamp, I noticed it instantly. The alcove was not the same shape. The black wall had shifted. A jagged crack split down its center, just wide enough to fit a hand, and through it, blackness yawned. A tunnel. The crack widened as we chipped at it with axes, each blow echoing dully inside the alcove. The ice fractured reluctantly, shearing in long, vertical strips, until, with a final snap, part of the wall gave way. A hollow space opened beyond, dark as a throat. None of us spoke. We simply looked at each other, clipped headlamps to our hoods, and went in. The tunnel was narrow enough that our shoulders brushed both walls. Its surface was not natural ice. At first I thought it had been carved, but the grooves were not the marks of tools. They ran smooth, symmetrical, curling in arcs that defied any mason's hand. The whole passage curved slowly downward, every angle just a degree off true. It made my head swim if I stared too long, like walking inside a geometry that wanted to slip out of comprehension. We hadn't gone 10 meters before Dr. Daniels bent down and picked up a boot sole from the frost. Its leather had gone stiff with age, the nails at its heel hand-forged. A little farther on, we found the rest of it, collapsed into powder at his touch. Soon there were more remnants, rusted chisels, a split pickaxe with a handle wrapped in strips of hide, a scattering of cloth fragments that might once have been walrus pelts. None of it seemed randomly discarded. It was arranged along the walls in a deliberate, curated order, as if left intentionally. Rook, Dr. Chen murmured. Her voice was flat, as if naming him both explained and condemned the scene all at once. The passage opened into the first chamber. I had to stop in the threshold and catch my breath. The space wasn't large, but it was dense. Stacked in precise rows were slabs of the same black-green stone we had seen in the spiral above. Each was the size of a coffin lid, their surfaces smooth, polished. There were no carvings of words or images, but the arrangement felt meaningful. One leaned against another at a subtle tilt. Another was rotated a degree off-center. A third was propped diagonally across them both. It was deliberate architectural thought, expressed without language. Dr. Lars ran a hand over one, muttering about mineral composites. But I barely heard him. The arrangement gave the impression of meaning, like someone had been trying to think in stone, to hold on to an idea too large for words. We moved on, thoroughly unsettled. The next chamber was worse. It appeared to have been hollowed directly from a single mass of glacier ice, a dome that gleamed like glass beneath our headlamps. But the light didn't behave properly. Instead of scattering evenly, it bent, warped, and converged to points, as if the walls were giant prisms. Beams curved along impossible arcs, overlapping in ways that created dizzying afterimages in the eye. When I blinked, I still saw the room glowing. Dr. Daniels muttered, Feels like we're walking inside a lens. We pressed deeper. The air grew colder with each step, unlike the kind of cold we knew. This was layered, dense, a cold that filled the lungs until every breath dragged heavy. My eyelashes frosted, our clothes stiffened with rime. The silence deepened until I could hear the throb of my own pulse in my ears. The tunnel curved one final time and widened into a chamber so vast. My headlamp beam vanished into the dark before I could find the far wall. The air was different here, stiller, denser. Every breath crystallized in my throat. It felt less like we had descended into a cave than into a vault, a pocket sealed away for millennia by the shifting bones of the earth, a natural cryostasis, locked by tectonics and pressure, untouched until now. And at its heart, pressed against the front edge of the ice wall, was a hand, not human. It dwarfed us, larger than a snowmobile. Each finger was as long as a person's body, each nail a curved ridge of horn, worn smooth by unimaginable time. The skin was pale, bleached of all color, ridged with pressure cracks that splintered through the ice. The edges of the hand blurred back into shadow, swallowed by depth, as though the rest of whatever owned it stretched far beyond the walls we could see. We never saw the whole, only the hand. That was enough. The ice around it was different from the rest. Solid, no bubbles or pockets of air. Wet, veined with trickles that gleamed under our lights. Drops ran slowly down the fissures, beating on the chamber floor. The glacier was holding, but only just. Dr. Daniels swore softly, his voice breaking the hush like glass dropped in a church. The closer we stepped, the clearer it became that people had been here before. The floor was littered with remnants, splintered scaffolding half encased in rime, the bent frames of lanterns, the skeleton of an old tripod drill. Some of the gear was modern, corroded aluminum, battery housings warped with cold, but others were much older. Chisels, timber braces, and a cracked oil lamp with a crest of the Royal Society. Dr. Jen crouched by a rusted brace, running her glove across the corroded metal. Different expeditions, she said quietly, different centuries. Near the base of the ice wall, half buried in frost, was a brass plate green with corrosion. We scraped it clear enough to read. The letters had been punched deep, uneven, but still legible. It is not dead. It is cold. The earth must not thaw. I stared at the words until my eyes blurred, until the cold sank deep into my bones. My mind kept circling the same thought. What kind of thing needs to be kept cold? A sudden noise snapped me back, a soft crackle, wet and sharp. The ice beneath the enormous hand had fractured further, a black seam running like a fresh wound. From it leaked something darker than water, thick frost spreading upward, staining the chamber wall in jagged black veins. It's moving, Dr. Daniels whispered. It isn't, Dr. Chen shot back, but her voice wavered. I took a step closer against all instinct. I couldn't see movement, but I could feel it, a heaviness radiating from the thing beyond the ice. No vibration or sound, just presence. Dr. Chen had gone silent. She was kneeling by the sidewall, brushing frost away with a mitt. When I joined her, I saw what she uncovered. More collars, the same bronze collars we had seen on the Walrus, row after row of them embedded deliberately in the ice, stacked like bricks in a wall. Each one was etched with spirals, each frozen into place as if hammered into the glacier itself. It was Dr. Chen who found the satchel, half-rotted leather wedged between a fallen scaffold, brittle strips fused with ice. She cut it free and started searching for answers amid the piling questions. Inside were notebooks, the pages warped and blurred by centuries of frost. Alongside them, a spool of microfilm cartridges sealed in wax, the kind used in the early 20th century for long-term archives. We passed them carefully between us, reading by headlamp glow. The words were fractured, sentences lost in smears of mold, but the fragments that remained were enough. Not a god but inversion, the hand of reversal, the undoing of order. It must not warm, it must not wake. Each journal circled the same truth. The thing locked in the glacier wasn't alive in any sense we understood. It was a force given shape, a presence that gnawed at the fabric of structure itself. It wasn't creation nor destruction, but reversal, and always the walruses. They weren't just animals or accidents of nature, but guardians that defied nature. The collars were brands binding them to the task, a duty impressed upon them, passed down in ways no science could explain. "They've been here since Rook," Dr. Chen whispered, holding one of the journals close to the glow of the headlamp. "Maybe longer." Dr. Daniels shook his head. "That's not possible. Walruses don't live a century." "They do," Dr. Chen said, though her voice shook. "These do. It's why they don't attack. It's why they wait. They've outlasted every expedition, every storm, every year since this place was sealed. They're still keeping watch." The thought chilled me more than the air ever could. The same colossal sentinel we tranquilized, alive when Rook carved his notes in 1847, was alive now, leading us here. I thought of the collared walrus we tagged, how it hadn't resisted, how it seemed almost expectant. Was it even sedated when we tried to tag it, or was it just pretending? The spiral depression, too, was explained, not in clear language but in implication. It wasn't a natural feature or some mystical sigil meant to invite discovery. It was a warning mark carved into the ice to be seen only from the ground, a sign that said, "Here lies a lock, tend to it." The walruses could guard, they could lead, but they couldn't repair. For that, human hands were needed. I felt the weight of that realization settle in my chest. We weren't trespassers here, nor did we discover something. We'd been summoned to a duty long abandoned. "They brought us," I whispered, before I even realized I'd spoken. The others looked at me, uncertain. "They could have killed us a dozen times over," I continued. "But they didn't. They drove us here. Every time they push us closer because they can't do it themselves, but someone has to." The silence that followed was heavier than the cold. Each of us looked back toward the wall, with the colossal hand pressed against the thinning ice, its blurred outline stretching into blackness. The frost beneath it cracked again, a bead of water running down like sweat. No one needed to say what we all felt, that this place had been tended once and then abandoned, that the guardians had endured without their human stewards. That duty had lapsed. Dr. Chen closed the notebook, her gloves trembling. "If this fails," she said, "if the ice goes, it isn't just us that dies." No one disagreed. We had seen enough. None of us said it, but the silence between us carried the decision. Dr. Lars could barely put weight on his ankle. Dr. Daniels wouldn't stop shaking, and I felt a sickness in my bones that went deeper than cold. We had to leave. We packed the journals, the satchel, and a handful of collars chipped from the wall. But then came the sound. A crack, sharp, splitting, echoing through the vault like thunder under ice. I turned. The fissure beneath the enormous hand had widened further. My light pressed against the thinning frost. A patch had broken fully free. For the first time, a fraction of the flesh of the thing was exposed. It wasn't dead flesh like we'd hoped. The pale skin shimmered with a slick translucence, veins pulsing faintly like trapped rivers. Steam rose in slow curls, and from that tiny breach the chamber began to change. Black frost raced up the chamber wall, crawling across scaffolds, shattering metal into flakes. One of the journals curled in on itself, pages crumbling to powder as if centuries had passed in seconds. We panicked, scrambling for ropes, dragging Dr. Lars, shouting over each other until Dr. Chen stopped us. Wait. She held one of the notebooks open, her breath fogging the page. Look. Scroll diagrams filled the margins, sketches of ice rigs, annotations in Rook's sharp script, layers, barriers, freeze, retreat, repeat, words blurred. But the meaning was plain enough. They had fought this same fight before. They didn't just leave, Dr. Chen said. They sealed it again and again. We can too. We tore through the remnants, gathering anything that could help. Rusted drills, fractured piping, frozen tanks of long-spent chemicals. Useless. But beneath the scaffolding, we found something stranger. A cluster of iron cylinders, thick-walled, capped with brass fittings. Primitive refrigeration gear, the kind expeditions once used to store harvested ice. The seals were warped but intact. When Dr. Chen pried one open, a draft of air hissed out so sharp it crystallized on her glove. Even after all this time, the old technology still bit with cold. It wasn't much, but with what we had left in our packs, fuel, coolant, a working pump, it was enough. The plan was insane. We threaded the hose across the fissure, primed the pump, and fed our last reserves of fuel into the engine. Melted snow sloshed through the line, spraying in a thin sheet across the crack. Immediately we opened the antique tanks, forcing their breath of ancient frost over the surface. The effect was violent. Water seized the brittle ice almost on contact, a skin spreading jaggedly across the wound to force a new layer of cold. All the while, I saw the colors of life returning to the once dead exposed flesh, the behemoth straining to grasp onto what little freedom it was allowed. I could see moisture beating on its ridges, drops pattering against the floor like falling stones. Where they struck, the ice sagged and bled black. We worked until our gloves stiffened, until our lashes froze shut, until Dr. Lars collapsed against the wall, whimpering through clenched teeth, and slowly, unbelievably, a new layer formed. Thin, brittle, translucent as glass, but a layer all the same. The chamber quieted, the black frost halted, trapped beneath the skin we had forced into place. The hand loomed, blurred once more behind a veil of ice. None of us spoke. We knew it wouldn't last. Hours, days, a season at most. But not forever. That was when we saw that the way back was blocked. At the mouth of the shaft, walruses stood shoulder to shoulder, silent and unmoving, their collars gleaming with frost, a living wall of white. Dr. Daniels raised his rifle, hands shaking. "We're not getting out of here," he whispered. But they didn't advance. Their posture was docile. They simply waited. It wasn't an aggression. It was an expectation. Dr. Chen's breath hitched. "They want one of us to stay." The words landed like stones. We all felt the terrible truth of them. This place had been abandoned. Its human stewards vanished, their duty broken. The walruses had guided us here, not to witness, but to decide. Dr. Lars tried to stand. His bad ankle gave way, and he crumpled again, cursing. Dr. Daniels pressed the rifle harder into his shoulder, teeth bared. "I'm not dying here." I looked at Dr. Chen. She was already watching me, calm despite the tears freezing on her cheeks. "I'll do it," she said simply. "No," I started, but the walruses shifted, their massive bodies leaning just enough to block the shaft further. Their silence was deafening. Dr. Chen touched my arm. "You'll go back. You'll tell them. Maybe they'll listen." There was nothing left to say. We hugged through the stiffness of our suits. Dr. Lars clutched her hand with both of his, his lips trembling too hard for words. Dr. Daniels turned away, shoulders heaving. When we moved, the walruses parted just enough for 3 to pass. I looked back once, just once. Dr. Chen stood at the base of the ice wall, her headlamp beam casting a shadow against the colossal hand. She raised the collar in both hands and pressed it to the frozen surface, as if completing a circle. The walruses stayed with her, and we climbed. We didn't look back as we climbed out of the spiral. None of us could bear to. The silence was crushing enough. No last words, just the hiss of our own breathing in our masks, the creak of the rope, and the endless white above. By the time we reached the surface, a storm had begun to close in. The crater blurred in drifting snow, the black-green platform already half buried, as if the world itself wanted to erase what we had seen. The collared walrus still waited on the rim, a silent guard of honor. The plane took us south, and Dr. Chen remained behind, sealed in that vault of ice with her impossible duty. The weight of it pressed on me more than any silence could. We completed our original mission and returned to command. The debriefing was tense, back in a windowless room that smelled of coffee and stale air. Dr. Lars gave his account. Dr. Daniels gave his. I followed, words tumbling out as if on autopilot. We said Dr. Chen had been lost in a massive ice collapse. Conditions made recovery impossible. She was MIA, unrecoverable, tragic, but not unprecedented. During the debriefing, I had the words in my throat. I imagined standing in that sterile room and telling them everything. The hand, the vault, the collars. Dr. Chen standing sentinel at the base of the ice wall. Her warning. If the ice goes, it isn't just us that dies here. But I didn't. Not because I was afraid they wouldn't believe me, but because I was afraid they would. And they'd come back with drills and charges and cameras, and the lock would fail. I signed my name on the dotted line, ink scratching across paper. And with that, the truth was buried deeper than the White King itself. I didn't want it that way, but I was scared. It was better. A single name marked lost than the whole world undone. Months passed. The routine came back. Fieldwork, reports, assignments. I told myself I was fine, that she had chosen a path, and all I could do was honor it by keeping quiet. But guilt doesn't soften with time. It hardens, sharpens until every quiet moment cuts. I couldn't shake the memory of her last words. You'll go back. You'll tell them. Maybe they'll listen. I didn't. Not yet. Winter returned, and with it another mission. Not to the same site, but to the same latitudes. Same ice. Same silence. Same endless sky. The Arctic doesn't change. It only waits. One night, holed up in a weather tent, while the wind clawed at the canvas, I found myself staring at the shortwave radio set we'd brought for contact. Its dial gleamed faintly in the lamplight, the metal pitted from years of use. I hadn't touched that frequency since the day we left her, but my hands moved before I could stop them. I tuned the dial slowly and deliberately to the numbers we'd used in our previous mission. Static roared, then thinned, then, "Hello?" Her voice crackling, faint, distant, as if dragged across miles of frozen air. But hers, my throat locked. "Jen, are you okay?" There was a long pause. The hiss of static filled the tent, the wind outside shrieking in chorus. Finally, her voice came back, thin but steady. "I'm here." I pressed my hand to my forehead, dizzy with relief. How are you surviving? Food? Heat? Another pause, longer this time. The walruses provide. I stared at the radio. So many questions swam through my head. I wanted to ask what that meant, what they brought her, what bargain had been struck. But the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I asked, "And the seal? The fissure?" Static swallowed half a reply. but I caught the words that mattered. It's holding. For now. The signal crackled, faded. I twisted the dial desperately, searching for her again, but only static answered. I sat in the dark long after the wind died, her voice circling my head like the spiral in the ice. It's holding. For now.